The religious right cozying up to President Trump, this even after new allegations that he had an affair with a porn star. But aren't those the same folks who hammered one Bill Clinton? And why they're supporting a twice-divorced man who used to own casinos with strip joints? Well, the president, he's doing a victory lap. Democrats, they're regrouping, but the fate of hundreds of thousands of dreamers still up in the air. We're taking a look back at the last shutdown and counting down to what could be another. And hey, it is election year, but you wouldn't know it when you look at New York's governor's race. Andrew Cuomo, he's facing a couple of unknowns, and no one else wants to run. But the question is, will the Percoco corruption trial change that? We'll go to Lower Manhattan to see how the trial is going. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you very much for joining us this Tuesday evening. Well, tonight we find ourselves in, frankly, a pretty common place, yet again hurtling in the uncertainty that is Trump world. We pivot moment to moment from things like government shutdown to widening Russia probe, and the only constant, it is a president who is as unpredictable, unpresidential, and unapologetic as any public figure in American history. But to be fair, after a lifetime of tabloid scandal and a campaign that can only be described as unseemly, did we really have a right to expect more a year later? Answer probably is no. Now, while I've been and will continue to be as vocal a critic of what Trump has done to our nation and the office of the presidency, I got to say my real anger is reserved for those who have enabled him. Now, legions of Republicans on Capitol Hill who condemned Trump all the way up to and even some even after the convention, they have suffered a convenient case of mass amnesia, as well as, I believe, moral absenteeism. Now, when a president stokes racial divides, abandons and insults Americans victimized by natural disaster, threatens to curb freedoms of the press, obstructs a probe into his own Russia investigation, insults women, people of color, Latinos, our courts, intelligence agencies, our allies, oh hell, just about everybody, I guess, other than somebody named Putin, when that happens, and no one from the great party of Lincoln, other than lawmakers retiring in November and a precious few others, speak up, well, I believe that's a recipe for government dysfunction and a destruction of its very own credibility. Now, that said, a politician being willing to shift his or her moral compass if they get the policies they want is sadly hardly unprecedented. But when the moralists in the faith community, often the loudest voices who condemn personal failings and demand their purity standard on both lifestyle and choice, when those voices too have rank hypocrisy, that is beyond pathetic. Now, the sleaziness of Donald Trump, it would take longer than this hour-long show to recount. But in the very same week that revelations come out that Trump paid off a porn star to keep quiet about their affair, an affair, I may add, that reportedly took place just after his third wife gave birth, Tony Perkins, the head of the Family Research Council, said that Trump should get a, quote, mulligan on not just the affair, but his scandal-filled life. Now, for those of you who don't play golf, a mulligan is essentially a do-over. Now, let's go back in time for a moment. The same Family Research Council once said, quote, "The character counts in a people, in the institution of our society, and in our national leadership," end quote. They were talking, of course, about one President Clinton some 20 years ago, essentially saying that personal character is inseparable from presidential virtue. And by the way, Family Research Council was hardly alone. Pat Robertson, well, the good Reverend said that Clinton, quote, debauched, debased, and defamed the presidency. James Dobson, another moral voice, said we were facing a, quote, profound moral crisis, end quote. You know, you can argue maybe they were right at the time. But try for a moment to rationalize that with what I'm about to say. That was then, and this is now. And now this president, Donald Trump, of all people, gets a mulligan. Now, beyond the serial infidelities, the misogyny he's done, the racism, the countless moral failings, the evangelical faith leaders have suddenly gone mute, just as they did as Roy Moore, the alleged pedophile, invoked God's name and Trump's support. Again, those moral voices went quiet. Listen, I'm not a babe in the woods here. Transactional politics are nothing new. But the enabling of this charlatan in the White House by Congress, and shamefully from supposed men of God, it's worse than shameful. I believe it's immoral. All right, glad I got that off my chest. Coming up next, the government shutdown is over, at least for now. We could have to go through this yet again in just 3 weeks' time. We're going to take a look at the winners, the losers, and where the heck we go from here.